Smith at 30, yeah, you can count me in. I would not take him at number 10.
Little bit of a redundancy from a trade standpoint. We got Dave in the green room. Let's see if Xander can bring him up. Dave Zangaro, NBC Sports Philadelphia. Good to see you, buddy. Um, Jody and I were just talking about the draft. We'll start there. The top 30 visits, we were talking about Nolan Smith as one of them. But from a larger perspective, Dave, I wanted to get your thoughts because we were debating it. You've been through a lot of these draft processes. What do you, when you look at the top 30 names? I got 16. You might have more at this stage, but somewhere in that range. What do you take out of them? Do you take anything? I take themes. What are they looking at? Positions. What do you take?
Sometimes, but sometimes it's like it's a medical thing, or it's like you want to check out a guy's character. So it's not as simple as, oh, they're interested in these players because they brought them in. Sometimes they just had like unanswered questions. If a prospect is super clean and they know everything they need to know about them, then they're not going to waste the top 30 on them. So
yeah,
something to keep in mind. You can try to follow it a little bit, but sometimes you end up chasing your tail because it doesn't really amount to a lot.
All right. One of those guys they brought in was Nolan Smith. I was just talking about that with John. I don't see him as a viable number 10 pick for the Eagles. Not that he's not a talented football player. He is. But if you're talking about a team that already has Hassan Reddick on its roster, a smaller, speed rushing edge player, would you want to pair him with a guy like Nolan Smith, who seems to have the same kind of traits that he does? Doesn't make sense to me. Do you think he's a legitimate possibility for the Eagles at number 10?
Yeah, I mean, it's not like pairing him with him isn't, to me, it doesn't really encapsulate it, because if we agree that edge is a position they could add in this draft, and I think we all kind of agree that it's a position they value, it's a pretty good draft for edge players. They're going to rotate these guys. So, I mean, that's like a philosophical question, right? Like, is the 10th pick worth a guy who's not going to start? And for the Eagles, it probably is, if it's at a position like this that they really value and that they know they're going to play the guy. It's different than, if they draft an offensive tackle, he's probably sitting this year. But if they draft an edge player, he's going to play. He's going to play significant snaps. The other part of this is, like, we think this defense is going to be very similar to what Jonathan Gannon ran. We have all those indications, but don't know how Sean Desai feels about some of these player profiles necessarily. The body build, to me, like, that doesn't prevent me from drafting Nolan Smith, because you're going to rotate these guys anyway. They're probably going to flip sides at times. For the most part, the edge rushers stay on their sides, but you're going to flip sides at times. So I think there is some importance to having different body types at those positions, because you don't want offensive tackles to get comfortable with, like, facing one guy that they rotate between. But I don't think that would prevent me from taking him if I thought he was the best player.
Yeah, that's also a position, Dave, where the league as a whole, you'll always see somebody, I always go back to Cleveland Burrow. Everybody's, well, he's going to be in the 20s. He ends up going 4. Marcus Davenport's the name I throw out there. The Saints traded a future 1 to get people fall in love with edge rushers. So, most people could have Lucas Van Ness in the 20s. The Eagles might go, nah, that's our guy at number 10. If you believe in an edge rusher, that's a position where, the old adage, either get the quarterback or get to the quarterback. That was the beauty of the Eagles. They had the quarterback and they got to the quarterback. It's pretty important to do both. So that's a position, to call it valuable is probably an understatement.
Yeah, I will say this, though, with the Eagles, they wouldn't have drafted Cleveland Farrell that high.
No, they wouldn't have.
They would have.
But I mean, certain teams, it's just one guy.
But that's the thing with the Eagles, is that, like, they're trying to maximize value at every position, really, except for quarterback. If they have the quarterback they want, they're going to take them. But Not in this draft. I'm saying in general. But with every other position, they kind of look at it from a value standpoint. Like, if we can get this guy at 15, we're not going to take him at 10.
Yeah.
Or at least we'll try not to. We'll try to maximize value. We'll get a pick back. We'll move around the board. Howie does that very well. He has a really good feel for what the rest of the league is doing. And that's a part of the draft that I think some teams just fail to do. And I say this a ton. If people have heard me talk about the draft before, they've heard me say this, but most teams, it's like get the best player. Howie is get the best player at the best value. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but it's like a layer to the draft that I think a lot of teams are missing.
I do agree with you on the fact that Howie plays Monty Hall better than anybody else on draft day and has good information and good feel on what the rest of the league's going to do. Is that because the Eagles have lost as many front office people as they have over the last couple of years? That Howie's got some dirt on these guys and go, yeah, I let you walk, but if you don't tell me who you're going to take in this spot, I'm going to release these pictures. How the hell does he do that? How does he know what other teams are going to do?
Yeah, I don't think it's that. But look, he also does have a pretty good understanding of like the way these guys think. And I think that factors into it. He's very good at gathering information, and his staff is very good at that. And sometimes they're going to be wrong. Like the draft is all about smoke screens and trying to read through them. And look, Howie's been doing this for a lot longer than a lot of other GMs.
That's true.
And experience matters. He was the youngest GM in the league when he got hired, and I mean we're 13 years later. He's done this for a long time now, so minus a year. He's done this for a long time. He has a good feel for it on draft day, and it doesn't mean he's making the right picks all the time. We've seen some disasters, but in terms of maximizing the value of the draft, I'm not sure there's anyone who does it better.
No. And you say minus a year. I think that year really helped him. I don't know if Howie Roseman 2.0 becomes Howie Roseman 2.0 without that year. I mean, I do think he sort of reflected on what he did poorly. Not that he does everything perfectly, but he's a different guy now. It's not just the experience, as you mentioned. That's a big part of it. I think he did learn from being set off to the other side of the building.
Yeah, I agree with that. I always say, like, if you write some memoir, it's going to be my year away, the Howie Roseman memoir.
My year getting a raise and getting to travel wherever I wanted to travel. By
pretty
Howie
much.
Roseman.
The most impressive thing about him coming back from that was going after Carson in 2016, which I still say worked out.
I agree.
It's a weird thing, but like to be that aggressive, getting back in that chair and saying, like, I think a lot of guys would have been like, I got this job back. I don't want to lose it. I'll just play it safe. And he didn't. And I always give him credit for that. He was so aggressive that year. And it started before it started kind of unloading everything Chip did and undoing it. Maybe there was a little spite in there, but I think there were wise decisions from a football standpoint too. And just like how aggressive he was, he hit the ground running that year. And that was always so impressive to me because I think a lot of guys in that position would have been like, man, I got a second chance. I'm going to play this safe and hold on to this job. And he didn't do that. He went for it. And if he drafted the wrong quarterback and Carson wasn't very good early, he might lose his job. So he banked on it. He mortgaged a lot to go get him. And look, it didn't work out in the end, but it worked out enough to win them a Super Bowl. So I give him a ton of credit for just how aggressive he was when he got back in that chair.
When Howie took his year abroad, didn't he spend a week with Ted Lasso? I think that was part of the Howie learning curve.
He did spend with the Met. I always forget his name. I remember Cashman. Maybe you remember Dave. R.C. Buford he visited with, and then the Manchester United guy, but I don't remember his name.
I don't know his name.
That's not Ted Lasso's team. I thought it was. I'm getting confused here.
AFC Richmond. Sadly, I know that.
If Howie made it work for him, more power to him. Here's my draft question, Dave, and I don't think we've discussed this with you. You've discussed it on the air. I've seen you play on NBC Sports, and we've discussed it plenty here on Birds 365. To Bijan or not to Bijan at number 10? That's what everybody wants as far as
Peter
questions asked.
throwing a log on the fire this morning, Dave. If I was Howie,
I haven't seen that. What do you say?
He said if
He
he
said
were
they
Howie,
should take him at number 10 and tell the
Bijan.
world, dare to stop
And
the offense.
I had the same reaction as Dave.
Yeah, I mean,
we were just talking about value, Dave.
What
we
are
were
we
just
doing?
talking about value.
It's not like we spin our. I feel like we do this every year. We spin our wheels talking about something that we know is not going to happen.
Yeah.
It's just not going to happen.
Look,
Bijan's a great player, and he would be good in this offense. I have a hard time believing they're going to do it. Should they do it? Maybe that's a different discussion. But we know they're not. So, I feel like I get it. This is what the draft is for. It's fun. We're all having fun. We do mock drafts. We talk about it. But realistically, are the Eagles going to draft Bijan Robinson at 10? No, I don't think they are. I have a hard time believing they are. You can make the case. You can do all the arguments like, okay, they have a good offense. They're one piece away. They have 2 first-round picks. Robinson might be a special player. At the end of the day, I don't think they're going to do it. I think they're going to be too many other good players, very good players, elite players at positions they value more. So I don't think they're going to do it.
Before I get back to the draft, because Jody brought this up, and I'm going to get your take on it, Dave. Wherever we are, April 10th, the official date, the Eagles have not announced their stinking coaching staff. Unless they did it while I was on the air in the first hour. We have still not talked to Sean Desai or Brian Johnson, the new coordinators. Why? What are they doing? Now, obviously, they got a late start, but what is the thought? Because it's not like I think they don't have the plan, whether it's going to be Tabor Johnson as secondary coach or DK McDonald. I don't know, but they know who's going to be there. What is this about?
Well, Nick is now interviewing his 200th defensive quality control assistant. So,
the owner gave him credit for that. His diligence in interviewing people to make sure he gets just the right guy.
And look, I'm joking about that, but it is important, and it's something that Nick is so in lockstep with the owner on. Whereas, like, you think back to Doug, and like that was one of the reasons he got fired was because he didn't want to go through that process. So, like, I don't think that's lip service from the owner. Like, he really likes that about Nick, and he likes the process he goes through. And we'll see if it works. I mean, none of that means he's going to hire the right guys, but at least there's a why behind it, and he can explain it to Jeffrey, like what he went through to get these guys and why he liked DJ Elliott as his linebackers coach. He can go through that whole process and explain it. Don't know why they don't have coaching staff yet. We were supposed to talk to the coordinators the week after the combine.
Yeah.
And that just didn't happen. And then I think they were like, let's finalize the roster. And now they're like, well, the draft is coming. We don't want them to get asked draft questions. So, I mean, doesn't make any sense to me. But eventually we'll talk to these guys. I'm excited to talk to Sean Desai. At least we know Brian Johnson a little bit. I don't think like Sean Desai is going to start answering a ton of scheme questions, but I'd like to know philosophy stuff. I'd like to learn a little bit more about him, and hopefully we get to do that soon.
Let me ask you about Sean Desai, because you brought a name up earlier that I want to revisit. Edmonds at safety. When he signed, both John and I the next day said here on Birds 365, really? Because we got so ingrained in Gannon that he has a system and certain players fit his system, and he's going to get the type of players who can do exactly what he wants. He's not going to be a square peg and a round hole guy. But then they signed Edmonds, and he just didn't seem to fit what the Eagles safeties look like these last 2 years under Gannon, that he was a box safety and a guy who's going to come up and make tackles and maybe even blitz a little bit, which Gannon almost never did with his secondary players. And I optimistically thought, a coach with an open mind, that he's going to be flexible, that he's going to know that there's more than one way to skin a cat on defense, which was one of my main critiques of Jonathan Gannon. Even though I was a fan, I thought he was a rigid guy. Players have to fit my system. Was I overly optimistic? Was it just Howie trying to give himself a safety net at the safety position? What did you read into the fact that Edmonds wasn't, at least in his career and what his stats said he wasn't necessarily a guy who would fit with the former Eagles defensive system?
If they had paid him, I might agree with you. I might think that they didn't pay him. I mean,
That $2 million didn't impress you, huh?
Well, it's $600,000 guaranteed. He has the same amount of guaranteed money as Greedy Williams. So they did not tie themselves to Terrell Edmonds. So because of that, like I think you kind of said safety net. I think the idea is in free agency, you just try to fill the holes. That way you're not reaching when the draft comes. And that's kind of the impression I got from Edmonds. And maybe he'll be fine. Maybe he'll be a starter. But they're not tied to him. So, if they had signed him, if he was like a better player and he played that style and they signed him to like, a 3-year, whatever, $20 million deal, then I'd say, okay, now they're not tying themselves to a system. They're going to play this guy. I can't even guarantee he'll be on the roster. I think he will be. I think he's a leader to be a starter right now, but the guaranteed money is just not there. So we'll see about that. But I agree with your assessment about his play. Like he's kind of has been a strong safety. And at least in Gannon's system, like he wanted those positions relatively interchangeable. But they have some options there, some fun things they can do with Edmonds and with Avonte, because Avonte Maddox is such a versatile guy that he can play the nickel, he can play safety. And the one guy everyone keeps talking about in the draft is Brian Branch, who has that safety nickel versatility as well. I couldn't see them taking him at 10, but at 30, now you're cooking with a little bit there.
And everybody says they've never taken a safety in the first round, Dave. But I hate when people bring that stuff up, because it's always about the year. It's always about the player. But, you can call him a defensive back because he's got versatility, and then they didn't take a safety again. You can go about it that way. There's a lot of ways you can go about it. But with Sean Desai in general, he's going to play big scheme, just like Jonathan did. And there's some good to that. There's some bad to it. But when you look at replacing 5 starters here, and there's a lot of people that gave Jonathan Gannon a lot of credit. There's a lot of people that disliked him because of the style of the defense. But the bottom line was number 2 defense in the NFL, number 1 passing defense, 70 sacks. There's no way Sean Desai. If Jonathan Gannon was back, if they raised the salary cap ceiling $100 million and they got all those players back, they weren't going to match that. Are the expectations going to be just too much for Sean Desai in Philadelphia?
It's a tough situation. You're right. And that's the thing. No matter what, they're not going to be as good. They don't have the personnel. So I hope Desai gets judged fairly because of that. Like when we're looking out there and we don't see Javon Hargrave and we don't see CJ and we don't see TJ Edwards, that matters. They lost some significant pieces. But I think if we see coaching's not about like getting good play out of good players. It's about like getting more out of lesser players. So
a little bit more.
If Desai can do that with some of these guys, then I think it will show up, and it might not show up in the stat sheet, but like I think we'll see it. I think if people are realistic about it, they'll see if he's a good coach or not. It won't be numbers though, because the numbers aren't going to be as good. And like the sack, they're not going to get 70 sacks. No, it's just that doesn't happen.
Dave, your partner in crime and in podcast, Ruben Frank, had a interesting take in his latest Rube's observations about the challenge for Nick Sirianni here in year number 3. And he went back and looked at several Eagles' most recent coaches past, and year 3 was a challenging one for a lot of them. And his line of logic made sense. You've shown your whole playbook in your first 2 years. You've given all your motivational speeches in the first 2 years. If guys are still there or been there for your first 2, 3 can be a challenging year, and it has come back and bit a couple of Eagles former coaches in the butt, but I'm sure there are other coaches who have actually had their best year in year number 3. How much do you buy into what Rube's selling? That year 3, just for coaches in general, and Nick Sirianni specifically, is a challenging one.
I don't know if it's year 3. I look at the challenge for Nick, and they lost a lot of talent. There's a reason teams go through Super Bowl hangovers. It's a lot physically, emotionally to come back from that. And the whole structure of this team's about to change from a salary cap perspective. I look at last year and everything went well. Like everything was like it worked out perfectly, and they still couldn't win a Super Bowl. And it's so hard to win in this league. And there are so many things that just aren't going to go that well this year. Right? Like it's impossible to get that seat. That was the best team I've ever covered.
Oh yeah.
I mean, that team was, to me, infinitely better as a whole.
Wasn't even close. I agree with you.
Than 2017, and they still couldn't win. It's really hard to win in this league. Are they going to get 70 sacks again? Probably not. Is Jalen going to play that well again? He might play. It's hard for me to imagine he's going to be that good again. There's just going to be some regression.
Health-wise, too. I mean, you think about
the entire team's health. Yeah, they didn't lose any. They had 22 of 22 starters in the Super Bowl. That's unheard of. So I think there's just going to be some natural regression to the mean. And it doesn't mean that Nick's not doing a good job. I think it'll tell us a lot about Nick, honestly, to keep getting that buy-in level from his players when things don't go well. Because everything went well last year. I mean, they were a juggernaut. So I think we all have to kind of temper expectations this year. They should be a good team. They still have a talented roster. They have the best quarterback in the conference. They have a good head coach. But they have 2 new coordinators. They have a ton of new starters. They're going to deal with more injuries. So I think those are the challenges. They happen to have they're happening in year 3. I don't know if year 3 matters as much as it's like this is what the situation they're in right now.
Yeah, I'm with you. Regression to the mean. I use that term all the time. It's going to happen in a bunch of different areas, and how they handle it. He might do a better coaching job and win 11 games next year.
Very possible. But
yeah. We mentioned a little bit about Edmonds, but I want to talk about the group as a whole, how he's gone through. He called it lottery tickets. So, if you look at all the one-year guys they signed for $2 million or less, if I were to tell you one guy is the Powerball, potentially, who's that guy? And if one guy's the bar scratch off, it's not going to amount to anything. Who's that guy, Dave?
The Powerball is Rashad Penny. Because at least we've seen him do it. Like he's a Pro Bowl caliber player, can't stay on the field. And it'd be foolish to think that all of a sudden he's going to stay on the field here, but that's why he's a lottery ticket. But at least with him, like we know when he's on the field, he's a very good player. Yes. Whereas the other guys, it's like, we don't know. We just don't know what they're going to be long-term. But with him, I've been a big fan of his, so maybe I'm a little biased there. He's the Powerball. Man, I'm trying to think. Morrow is like, you know what he is. He's not going to be great, but he at least played last year. He'll give you snaps. Who's the one I'm missing? So we have him, Greedy,
Brady. You got Justin Evans, who I think is a better fit for what the Eagles want to do defensively, at least from a trait standpoint. But he hasn't, he missed 3 years. I mean,
and he was a backup last year. It's not like he started last year. At least Morrow started last year, played every snap. I mean, Evans might be the one for me where I'm like, I don't know if this guy's going to be on the team.
Yeah.
And that's not like I haven't seen him play yet. But if I had to pick one of the guys in that group that isn't going to be on the team,
probably Evans.
Probably Evans. Yeah, because I think at least Greedy offers you some upside.
Yeah.
I was thinking Marcus Mariota won't go 0-2 like the Eagles' backup quarterback did this past year, Gardner Minshew. All right, Dave, don't know. We may or may not ask you to come back before the draft. No, you're going to get busy. We'll probably ask, but you might not be able to come on because you get that much busier when we get closer to the draft. So I'm going to put you on the spot right here, right now, assuming, which is a massive assumption, because chances are the Eagles won't draft at either 10 or 30, that Howie will trade both picks, either up or down or sideways. But saying they stay at 30, at 10 and 30, who do you think are the most likely guys to be picked in those two spots?
I'm gonna not play your game. I'm gonna say they're gonna trade up from 10.
All right, you're going to dictate terms. Good on you.
Yeah.
Zangaro, go ahead.
Jalen Carter, then. It's got to be Jalen Carter, right?
Well, I think Jalen Carter or Tyree Wilson.
Tyree Wilson, all right.
Yeah. If they can go up, and they have a track record of doing this. Like they'll target a guy, they'll trade up and get him. And I know that there's this thought that they need to like get more picks. They have a pretty talented roster. Like I don't know if they draft all these players, they might not have room for them on the roster. So
they got plenty of room on defense, Dave. They got to replace 5 starters, and you can say Milton Williams will pencil in, Nakobe Dean will pencil in.
Yeah, but I mean, if you can target a guy like Jalen Carter or Tyree Wilson, I think they'd do it. We've seen did it last year with Jordan Davis. They moved up a few picks because he fell into their range. I could see that happening again, and then. If they still have the 30th pick, it's tough because I don't know what they're going to do. Say they take a defensive lineman there. I could see.
What you just said. You dictated terms. You're taking a D lineman. So what's left at 30?
And left at 30, I'm going to have some fun. Big tight end from Georgia.
Oh!
No shot. No chance.
Why not?
No chance. I couldn't even start for Georgia. And you're going to take him in the first round?
Van Ness didn't start. Yeah. You're going to take him at 10?
Yeah.
No.
That is tremendous disrespect for the great Jack Stoll, Dave Zangaro.
Well, I look at this offense. I think they need one more pass catcher. Doesn't have to be a receiver.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be a receiver.
I don't think it should be a receiver.
I like it. Out of the box thinking. I like it.
Get yourself that 12 personnel package, some teeth.
I like it.
Not going to happen.
If I'm taking a tight end, I'd take the kid from Oregon State before I would take the kid from Georgia. The Utah kid's probably the best tight end. He's going to be gone. Well, no, let me make it a question. Do you think any tight ends will be taken in the first 30 picks?
Yeah.
I think the kid from Notre Dame is going.
This is a pretty good tight end draft.
Yeah. Now, how about that, Dave? Take the kid from Notre Dame and let Dallas Goedert play the slot. He's a great blocker. So if you want, one of the things with Dallas Goedert, he does both so well, but he's such a good blocker at times. You don't have him flexed out.
You know what's funny? So I had this theory that I ran by Jason Michael last year about Dallas that I said, I always wondered if his blocking ability has hurt his stats.
Yeah.
Because you got to keep him in line so much. And Jason Michael said, I actually don't think so. He said, I think that a lot of Dallas's opportunity in the pass game comes because teams have to respect his blocking ability and then they can leak him out, that's why I like talking to these guys. They're a lot smarter than me when it comes to this stuff. But it was something that like I had never thought about in those terms where it's like, sometimes we ask them to stay in line and block, but that opens up things in the pass game for them because teams have to worry about that.
Yeah, it's interesting. You opened my eyes. I didn't think about tight end. Now I'm starting to think about Michael Mayer because he can catch the football too.
We've got 3 more weeks. Let's keep the. We got to keep something to talk about.
Yeah,
all right.
I like it.
Since we're going down the road of just check the Eagles' track record, and if they haven't done it before, they'll never do it again. When was the last time they took a tight end in the first round?
I don't know, but they've taken them. I mean, they took Dallas Goedert at 49. They took Zach Ertz in the second round. Like, it's not like they devalued.
They took Miles Sanders in the second round. They took Shady McCoy in the second round. But there's no friggin' way they're taking Bijan Robinson in the first round because Eagles never take a running back in the first round. Either it's differentiated between the first and second round or it's not.
Well, it's differentiated between 10 and 30. I mean, that's different.
Yeah, that's
inherently different.
And the Eagles would have drafted Christian McCaffrey. They would have drafted him.
Things worked out. They got Derek Barnett.
Yeah, thanks. They worked out well. You're right.
Thank you very much.
Zangaro. Follow Dave on Twitter. You see it there. at D Zangaro, NBCS. I always screw that at NBCS. Read them, NBC Sports Philadelphia. I saw, for those who don't know, Dave is our resident world traveler. Not too much the world since the pandemic. So where'd you go this year, Dave?
I was out in Arizona for the owners meeting, so I just I stayed out there for an extra week, did a little road trip.
Nice.
It was nice. Yeah, I went up to Grand Canyon and Capitol Reef and Zion. So I packed in like 7 days of just nonstop, but it was fun.
7 days. And was the best part getting to pet the llama at the owners meeting?
I did not know Kemsky took that photo, and then that photo ended up on television. But when you're at an NFL party and there are llamas there, you go pet one.
That's true.
And or if you've been drinking at that NFL party, you get caught
No
petting
comment.
the llama. And let it be on record, Dave Zangaro took an obligatory shot at Derek Barnett, not me, because 19 out of every 20 times it's me.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Dave,
Dave, for letting
Jody
it
is
be
not a
someone
big
else
Derek
other than
Barnett
me.
fan. Yeah.
DZ, great stuff. Appreciate you coming on board. Thank you much. And like I said, we'll probably ask you on before the draft again. If you can do it, we'll appreciate having you. If we can't, we'll understand. Thanks for jumping in today.
All right, take care, guys.
Thanks,
Dave
Dave.
Zangaro, NBC Sports Philadelphia. Appreciate him taking a Derek Barnett shot. All right, Jody Mac coming back with Johnny Mac. Mac and Mac guys got to put a bow on the show here on Birds 365.